of Age by Paleowriter. Chapter 15. The night passed, sadly, slowly. Spike stood guard while twilight hovered over Rarity. Applejack fretfully darted between vigil and the cleanup of, well, Spike couldn't watch. The dragons carted away bodies of gargoyles by the clawfuls. There were some survivors, and Applejack made it her personal mission to make sure that the dragons didn't accidentally finish the job with them. Spike wasn't sure mercy was in the dragon vocabulary, but Applejack did manage to get more than a few dragons on her side. Plus, she coerced the sea serpents into providing some watery assistance to cool the burns of anyone left alive, so that was of some help. Spike had never seen so much death in his entire existence. Throughout all of his adventures with Twilight and friends, with all the enemies they faced, nothing had come close to this. Even fighting off the changelings hadn't been this bloody. As the night wore on, Spike couldn't help but remember the few times he met dragons before this whole war thing started. He'd been chased, bullied, and nearly talked into killing baby phoenixes by them at various points in his life. They didn't play by pony morals. They had their own code. So did the sea serpents, for that matter, though they spiffied theirs up behind frills and hair product. And the gargoyles had their own ethics as well. He wondered if the one he met in Everfree Forest was among the dead. Spike shifted his huge body, shielding Twilight from the worst of images. At least trying to save Rarity gave her something to concentrate on. Twilight's eyes were shut, and her horn sparked with some of the most intense magic Spike had ever seen in her attempt. She'd been like that for hours, just sitting there with Rarity. She hadn't to watch the horrors behind them on the battlefield even for a moment. Now, more so than ever before to him, war seemed like an epically stupid idea. This was all beyond sickening. And Spike still wasn't sure the good guys had won. Just that the very bad guys hadn't. Then again, if he was honest with himself, he had no idea how else the gargoyles could have been stopped. The solution the sea serpents and dragons came up with was fast and effective. Hopefully, the ponies hadn't to resort to such methods when battling the gargoyles in Equestria, though. If Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash were spared this type of burned into their brain imagery, it would at least be of some comfort. And thanks Celestia that Fluttershy hadn't been here to witness any of this. Spike knew he was a lost cause, though. He did never forget what had happened, but not for the same reasons as the others. He was just as fault as the other monsters. Even if he hadn't been part of the final attack, Spike shook. He knew, 100% certain, that he knew what he could be, if he gave in completely. This battle had been his Ponyville rampage all over again, just with more terrifying consequences. He had the ability to be the big, scary, and brutally destructive. It was part of him. But he didn't have to be that way forever. He was different from other dragons. He had a choice. His size depended on what he let himself be, and that, at least, was some relief, if he only could figure out how to control it. He looked down to Rarity. She was the only one who had ever been able to help him when he became the thing he feared most. And now? Spike grimaced. She was the same now as before. Twilight's magic glow surrounded her, pulsing in the dark of the early morning. No matter what had happened to Rarity, Spike was thankful she'd been spared seeing the end of the war. If nothing else, there was that. Rarity! He balled up his fist, digging his claws into palms. Spike had cried for almost the entire night already, and his eyes now stung for dryness. It was cruel, unfair. He didn't know what else to do. The longer the hours stretched on, the more Spike realized that Rarity's chances of pulling through, well, he dropped his head. Will somebody please bring in a monopost or something? She'd already been as lifeless when he brought Spike to Twilight. He really didn't know what he had been hoping to achieve. As Spike continued to grieve, Shuddering with tears that his eyes could no longer handle, a dragon walked over to stand by his side.
I came as soon as I heard. How is she?
The dragon asked. Spike turned. The red dragon looked at him, her face solemn. She looked a little familiar, but Spike had seen so many different dragons the past few days, he couldn't quite place her.
Don't know,
Spike mumbled. He looked back at his beloved Rarity on the ground in the dark.
Who are you? And why do you care about what happened to Rarity?
I'm sorry, she said. She set a hand on his shoulder.
I know she meant a lot to you, and you to her.
The pieces clicked into place. Rarity's prison guard. The dragon who dropped her off at his cell. Spike gave her a sideways glance.
She's one special pony. Taught me a lot.
The dragon continued. Spike nodded, not trusting himself to speak.
Rumor has it that you start to back down again,
the dragon said next, eyeing him.
But now look at you. You might not be anywhere near the size you were in battle, but you're still nearly my height. What happened?
Spike didn't reply. He didn't know. All he knew was that being a gigantic dragon was as good as being cursed, and he was determined to figure out how to control his size as soon as possible. The female dragon looked down at Rarity.
If you ask me, based on what I've heard, I think your growing has to do with how much you're honoring your inner dragon.
Spike growled at that, turning at her. My inner dragon? My inner dragon? Why would I ever want to honor that? Have you seen what dragons do? He gestured wildly at the piles of dead gargoyles. The dragon regarded him coolly.
War results in death. Some of us are more okay with that than others.
Spike spun back, his eyes landing on the two unicorns on the ground. The dragon winced.
Sorry. Bad choice of words.
You think? Spike snorted.
Listen,
the dragon said, a bit more gently.
Don't turn your back on your own kind so quickly. We aren't evil, despite what you've seen of us lately.
Spike just snorted again.
You have to believe me. Your inner dragon also knows how to love.
She continued.
For what Rarity told me, that love might even be stronger than the kind of love your peace-loving ponies can produce. A lifelong true love, true devotion. I think that's what got you to grow, really. You had to protect your life mate, keep her safe.
Rarity isn't something for me to hoard, Spike said. He could still feel the growl in his back of his throat.
I didn't say hoard. I said protect. Don't blast us all with the same colored flame, she said. We're complicated. We have more drives than just greed. You should know. You're one of us. And in any case, if you dislike us dragons so much, why not go back to being pony size? If love wasn't the reason you've grown so much again, why do you think you're still the size you are now?
Spike shut his eyes. He didn't want to think. Not right now. Not with...
Please, just go away.
It took a moment, but eventually the dragon did step back.
If that would be helpful, of course. Again, I'm sorry. She's my friend too. Please tell me if she recovers.
By the time Spike opened his eyes, the dragon was gone. He looked down, wondering how much of their conversation Twilight had heard. He doubted very, very much. The look of concentration on her face had, if anything, gotten stronger. He watched her and Rarity, wiping the new tears from his eyes, and trying to put the dragon's words out of his mind. Love couldn't be part of a dragon. How could creatures that knew how to love be so cruel and destructive? A moment later, Twilight gasped, interrupting Spike's thoughts. "Rarity!" she exclaimed, nearly toppling over where she stood. "Twilight!" Spike reached to support her. The tiniest of hopes dared to take up residence inside him. Something had happened. Something must have happened. Twilight clung to his claws, dizzily standing back upright. Spike watched Rarity, eagerly looking for any signs he improved. But she looked the same, still wasn't moving, still had her eyes closed. Spike's momentary optimism shattered as Twilight's horn died down. "Spike," Twilight said. Her voice was weak, but steady. Spike tore his eyes away from Rarity, unable to take any more pain in one night. Twilight wiped some of the sweat off her brow, exhaling loudly. Then, she did something absolutely amazing. Twilight Sparkle smiled. "Spike," she said again, looking up at her faithful assistant. "I think she's going to be okay." Like sunrise at the summer sun celebration, hope reignited in Spike's soul. Rarity blinked herself awake, one droopy eyelid at a time. She was warm, cozy really, yet she couldn't feel any blankets. Instead, she felt... Her eyes flew completely open. Scales. Spike was holding her. That meant he was okay. That meant she was okay. He's... Her brain wasn't waking up fast enough to process properly. They were on a beach. It was a beautiful, sunny day. "Hold it!" "Looks like some ponies finally awake," a soothing voice said. Rarity turned her head, looking down to the sand. "Princess Celestia, what are you?" Spike turned his giant head down to look at her, a toothy grin breaking over his face. "Rarity!" She looked back up at him, trying to say with her expression what her words couldn't handle just yet. "How?" Rarity managed. "Rarity! Oh, Rarity!" Spike squeezed her against his scales. Rarity's eyes bugged out a bit. Spike, darling." "Sorry!" Spike said quickly, letting her go and setting her down. "I'm just so happy you're okay."
"Oh, believe me, I'm happy that you're okay too. I'm a little confused right now."
Rarity's eyes shimmered at the dragon, even as he stumbled slightly in the sand, trying to regain her composure.
"And my head hurts."
Princess Celestia chuckled from her side, and Rarity flushed. She wondered what state her mane must be in. Perhaps she'd just been in a deadly battle and unconscious for goodness how long, but she didn't need to look completely foolish in front of royalty. Spike continued to smile at her, as she tried to smile in return, but the throbbing in her head made the muscles in her face hurt. Honestly, none of this felt real. Where were they? What was Princess Celestia even doing there? The last she'd known, Rarity had been moments from death, and Spike still horribly injured. A terrifying thought hit her, like a splash of beats on a black dress. Maybe this was a dream. Rarity stepped back in the hot sand, glancing around to find some proof she was actually awake. But she had no luck. Dragons and sea serpents littered the beach in absurdly large numbers. The sun was almost directly overhead. A comfortable breeze floated by, and Princess Celestia's mane, as always, fluttered with it. There wasn't a gargoyle to be seen. Confessing herself she wasn't dreaming, based on her surroundings, was an almost laughable notion. No, she couldn't trust her eyes. What she needed was a real explanation.
"How?"
she began, turning back to Spike.
How did I? What in the equestria did you actually take it ages ago, darling?"
Ugh! That was too much.
"Did we?"
"We won!" Spike said. "Well, I guess. Wasn't exactly a triumphant victory." Spike's voice dropped its enthusiasm. Rarity peered at him more closely. "But hey!" he continued, trying to muster a happier tone. "What you did was fantastic. You're a hero, Rarity. How did you ever do that awesome magic thing anyway?" Rarity put a hoof to her horn, shaking her head.
I don't know. I just had to."
Her insides curled up around her. Spike's pained expression. She'd never seen him look like that before. It wasn't anything her imagination could have conjured up. So perhaps this wasn't a dream. Though, watching Spike, she got the distinct feeling he wished it was. But it wasn't. As her hair cleared, she realized that this wasn't a dream, and neither what had happened in that dark field. She felt her magic leave that night. She felt it. It was gone now. Her magic, her livelihood, her special talent. Rarity's face paled. Now what? Now, we invest in mana potions. Because mana potions apparently only exist in the Luniverse. You did well, Rarity, Princess Celestia said, stepping forward and setting a hoof on Rarity's shoulder. And so did my student, Twilight Sparkle. Spike brought you to her. If he was able to do something for you, I don't think any pony else, myself included, could have possibly done. You were almost beyond help. Was I that far gone? Rarity winced. She was. She known that. She has been good as dead. So it was Twilight that had brought her back. I need a Cyclops for saving my life. Rarity looked around. What does she know? She's consulting with the dragons. Princess Celestia caught Rarity's eye and held it. And there's something you should know before you see her, Rarity. What happened to you wasn't a matter of losing your life. It was a matter of losing your magic. Losing mine? Yes, I know. I know that all too well. The reason you are here now, alive, and standing in front of us, is because Twilight saved you by restoring it. Rarity's jaw dropped. See, what? Rarity gasped. Princess Celestia smiled faintly at her, in an almost motherly fashion. You are the embodiment of the element of generosity, Rarity, and as the source of that power, you achieved a feat I didn't know was possible, which, you can imagine, is saying something. The princess winked at both her and Spike. Rarity bit at her lower lip, trying to wrap her head around it all. Twilight saved me. Does that mean my magic is back? In that moment on the field last night, you generously gave up everything you had inside of you. Princess Celestia continued. You pushed your own magic away to save everyone else, Rarity. But Twilight, as the element of magic, was able to return it to you. Without your element, her element couldn't exist. In giving your generosity and friendship to Twilight over the past few years, she was able to return the favor and empower you. Does this mean I have my magic once again? Rarity asked, trying to make sure she completely understood before testing things for herself. It does indeed, the princess confirmed. Rarity looked to her side, her eyes landing on a seashell. She aimed her horn, and with a burst of energy, the seashell shot up into the air, trolling around. Rarity danced stupidly in place, letting out a giggle of hard-won glee. Spike, seemingly unable to go more than a minute or two without touching her, snatched her up into his arms and hugged her once again. Countless feelings bubbled up inside of Rarity, but the most overwhelming of all was happiness. They'd done it. They won. Spike was okay. More than okay. He was holding her. She cooed, doing her best to hug Spike back. Her hooves couldn't even reach to the either side of his chest, though, so she just settled for snuggling up against him. I'll give you two a moment, Princess Celestia said. I brought your friends Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie with me on my journey from Canterlot. I should go with them, as well as Twilight and Applejack. Know that you're awake. She flapped her wings and flew away without another word. Spike! You have no idea how happy I am right now, Rarity guessed. How happy you make me, Spike! You have no idea how happy I am! Spike countered. He held her tighter, but Rarity noticed he was careful not to squeeze too much, as he did earlier. Rarity, I thought you were dead! I thought you died! I was worried you died, Rarity replied. Darling, you should have seen the state you were in! The state I was in? Rarity, you were as good as gone! Rarity caught the distinct tremble of a sob in Spike's throat, and her positive mood stumbled. And the gargoyles were going to... But then they... A giant tear escaped Spike's eye, falling to the sand below. Rarity set a hoof on his chest. looking up at him in concern.
Spike, she asked gently, what exactly happened? After well, you know.
Spike swallowed and set his shoulders. Then he told her the story. He didn't tell her everything. He couldn't. But even sparing her the worst of the details, Rarity looked a little ill in his arms.
Poor Applejack,
she said, when Spike was finished.
Seems you probably saw the worst of it.
Spike nodded. He hadn't seen much of Applejack yet this morning. When she heard Princess Celestia had arrived with Rainbow and Pinky, she'd taken off to go greet them.
Perhaps I could get in her for a nice relaxation day at the spa,
Rarity mused. Spike raised an eyebrow. Not sure she considered that relaxing, Rarity.
You have a point.
Rarity looked up at Spike and smiled. The two of them laughed, and a bit of the tension from the past few minutes dispelled.
I am sorry, though, that you had to be there for all that,
Rarity said, when their laughter died back down.
You're too gentle a soul to have witnessed such things.
She snuggled into his chest again. Spike's insides fluttered. But then he registered her words, and expression fell. I'm not gentle. I'm awful. I hurt so many gargoyles,
Spike!
Rarity said, cutting him off and forcing him to make eye contact.
You only did so to save me, to save all of us. You can't blame yourself. They were going to kill every last one of us. Eat us, Spike!
Spike peeled. Eat you?
Yes,
Rarity exclaimed.
Why, that's what the gargoyles were saving me for in that field. Bringing stock for food, if you can imagine such a thing. Ugh.
Rarity shuddered in his arms.
And here's every pony thinking I'm some sort of hero. I was going to die anyway. I just felt that at the least I could do something useful before perishing.
She trailed off, looking out over the ocean. Spike's wings twitched. The idea of gargoyles snacking on his friends kicked his rage high enough back up that he didn't feel nearly as bad for their terrible fate as he had before. His eyes narrowed, and he tried to focus back on what Rarity was saying. Rarity, you are a hero, Spike said, making sure she understood that. We never would have survived if you hadn't stopped those space rocks when you did. He could feel her begin to shake.
Spike, she whispered, I was so scared.
Spike held her close, and they were quiet for several minutes, just watching the ocean waves in the midday sun. You could hear some seagulls calling. Dragons and sea serpents wandered up and down the beats around them, but no one came near. It seemed they were all either didn't care or were respecting the privacy of the two heroes.
I need to tell you something,
Rarity said, breaking their silence.
Something important.
Yeah, Spike said, looking down at her. She blinked at him once again. The way she set her face made Rarity not only look beautiful, but completely and utter resolute.
I love you, Spike,
he said. Spike dropped her. What? Rarity giggled as he fumbled, trying to keep her from falling onto the sand. Using her hose to steady herself, she gave him a smile.
You heard me. I love you, my darling Spiky Wikey. And I want you to know that.
Is this possible? Spike grinned so hard, his scaly cheeks hurt. Any attempts to speak on his part just left him stuttering, so he stopped trying. Rarity sighed, leaning into his chest, and Spike shut his eyes. This was perfect. Completely perfect. Oh, whoa! So he does have wings! A voice shouted. That's so awesome! Rarity spun, and Spike looked up.
Rainbow Dash?
The blue Pegasus flew toward them, rolling in the crisp air as he did so. Dude, Spike! This means he can fly now! Rainbow Dash grabbed at Spike's purple wings, yanking on them, and completely breaking the mood, much to Spike's chagrin. Look at that! Who would have thunk? Oh, hey, Rarity! Oh, good, Rarity, you're awake! Applejack said, trotting over to join them. She must have followed Rainbow Dash over. You had us blown water there for a while. Glad to see you up a bite. Rarity tossed her mane lightly from Spike's arms. She wore a smug expression that he simply adored. She was clearly tickled to see her friends again, while simultaneously still riding high for the admission that had left him so flustered, and of course, the associated power trip for that moment. He grinned a little down at her. Oh yes, Rarity was one up on him now. But Spike didn't mind one bit.
Never felt better,
Rarity replied, patting Spike's arm with one hoof.
Spike's been an absolute angel, watching over me like he has.
Rainbow Dash continued to zip around, taking out Spike's wings. You might want to watch out, Rarity, Rainbow Dash said, grinning slyly. Now that Spike is totally gigantic and totally cool, I'm beginning to see the appeal. Having a big scaly boyfriend would be pretty epic. Spike could feel his face go bright red, and his arms suddenly stealed over Rarity, rising up indignantly through her chest and into her eyes.
Don't you dare, Rainbow Dash! She exclaimed. He's mine!
She threw her hooves over Spike's chest, glaring. Applejack and Rainbow Dash burst out in laughter. Hers. The embarrassment temporarily subsided. Spike looked down at her, a big doping smile on his face. I am? It was Rarity's turn to turn bright red. Spike couldn't stop smiling.
Now who's one up?
But then the singing started, and Spike's embarrassment leapt back into existence with a vengeance.
Spike and Rarity sitting in the tree.
Rainbow Dash taunted Kissing. Then the next thing she knew, Rarity was falling through the air. She hit the ground with a sandy thump. Next to her, tiny Spike rubbed his backside. Sorry, he mumbled. He was back to being small. Though Rarity noticed, he managed to hold on to his wings somehow this time. Rainbow Dash howled in laughter even louder. Looks like Spike can't handle embarrassment any better as a big dragon than he can as a baby one.
Leave him alone, Rainbow Dash,
Rarity said, scooping Spike toward her.
He's a deer heart, no matter how big he is.
The Pegasus completely ignored Rarity. Look, he's back to being travel-sized. She flew circles around him, still laughing hysterically. It's time to trade turns. He was carrying you, now you. That's enough, already. Applejack interrupted, holding up her hat. Rainbow Dash, who hadn't been looking, flew straight into it and toppled into the sand. Let the two of them alone. Life has some real dice. Rarity shot Applejack a grateful look. Applejack nodded back at her. There were massive circles under her green eyes, and Rarity knew it just wasn't her and Spike that had a rough few days.
So, where are Pinkie Pie and Twilight?
Rarity asked, changing subjects and releasing Spike. He scratched his arms awkwardly by her side. Who ever knows where Pinkie Pie is? Rainbow Dash climbed back to her feet, tugging Applejack's hat back at her. She's probably got half the dragons and sea serpents in some massive game of tag or something. Twilight's been talking with some of the dragon folk, Applejack said, putting her hat back on. Oh, well, there, she gestured. Rarity peered in the distance.
Oh, my,
she said, upon spying them.
Looks like they're coming to pay us a visit.
Twilight, Rojo, and Nerf all walked up the beach toward them.
You better not hurt my spiky wacky Rojo!
Rarity glared at the pair of dragons heading their way. She took a protective step in front of Spike, just as he moved to do the same to her, and they collided. That just got Rainbow Dash laughing again. Rarity contorted her face a bit, refusing to blush any more. She'd get Rainbow Dash back later, that was for sure. But then Twilight drew closer, and Rarity's emotions did a 180.
I'm so happy to see you awake!
Twilight exclaimed, darting forward to meet her.
Twilight, darling!
Rarity exclaimed in return, smiling and embracing her tightly. Gosh, it felt incredible to see each of her friends again, even with the teasing. Twilight held her close.
We were so worried. Twilight, I don't know how I'll ever repay you,
Rarity said in complete earnest.
You saved my life, saved my magic.
But you saved us all, Twilight said, pulling back to look at Rarity with glistening eyes. Rarity blushed once more. It seemed her face was determined to stay red today, no matter what she wished. And anyway, Twilight added, wiping an actual tear out of her eye, what are friends for?
What a fence fault indeed,
Rarity agreed. They hugged again, and Rarity sighed. She had to be the luckiest pony in the world. A giant dragon cough interrupted them. Can we please save the living divvy still to later? Nerf asked. You dragged us over here. Now let's get this over with.
Get what over with?
Rainbow Dash asked. A deeper call sounded behind them. Spike turned to Rojo. He blinked at the turquoise dragon.
Hi?
Rarity bristled, and Rojo tried any funny business. But instead, Rojo just grimaced. Hello, Spike. He started. I just, wanted to apologize. Spike stared up at him.
Really?
Rarity gaped. Really? I played the wrong card. It all worked out in the end. But I didn't make the best choice for a fellow dragon. I didn't even treat you as a dragon. That was my mistake, and I'm sorry. You're one of us and should be under my protection.
Did you put him up to this?
Spike asked Twilight. Rarity was sure she must have.
There was no way. No,
Twilight said, shaking her head with a wry grin.
He honestly felt bad. The only thing I did was convince him to come over here and apologize to your face, instead of making me pass on the message.
Rojo called again.
And Rarity wonders he'd been wrong earlier.
Maybe she was dreaming. Nurse sidestepped closer to Applejack. You know, he said, I might have to offer up an apology of my own. He nodded at Spike. A pony for a life, mate. Seems pretty strange at first. But you're amazing at battle back there. He waggled his eyebrows at Applejack. I've never seen anything like it. Rarity threw a hoof to her mouth, trying desperately to hold back her laughter. Applejack's eyes were as wide as the wheels of her apple cart. What do you say? You think they've got the right idea? Nurse said, elbowing the farm pony. Applejack laughed nervously. Well, there. Let's settle things down in the notch, buckaroo. Don't get your hopes up. 9 times out of 10, I'm mostly the single mayor at the end of these flicks. Either that, or I'm busy with Twilight. Nurse shifted his wings, actually looking a little dejected, and Rarity couldn't help out anymore. She burst out laughing, and Twilight and Spike did the same. Rainbow Dash, however, had her eyes narrowed. Her? What about me? She punched Applejack in the shoulder. I'm clearly the most awesomest pony around. Really? Applejack turned, raising an eyebrow. And what makes you like that? Rainbow Dash flew up into the air, stretching her hooves. Oh, just you know, the whole saving Equestria with my sonic rainbows thing. Nothing big. Yeah, well, you do have a badge of honor from the dragons, and honorary knighthood from the sea serpents, Applejack retorted. Rainbow Dash's mouth dropped open. What? Not fair! That just got Rarity, Spike, Twilight laughing even harder. But then, an unassociated giggling sounded in the distance, and Rarity snapped her head up. She'd know that laugh anywhere. Pinky! Rarity exclaimed. The pink pony raced up on the sandy beach, cartwheeling next to a swimming Queen Ileana.
And then I said, don't look over there, look over here! And then the gargoyles turned away from like the best rocks ever and got pummeled in the face by one of Rainbow Dash's sonic rainbows! Have you ever seen a sonic rainbow? They're big, loud, and colorful, and go whoosh!
Pinkie Pie flung her hose apart in the air, face planting mid-cartwheel. She leaned up, spinning sand.
Pip! Super amazing!
Queen Ileana smiled, meeting Rarity's eye. Your friend is charming, generous one. Rarity ran forward to embrace Pinkie Pie.
Pinkie, darling! Where have you been in all of this? Saving Equestria,
she said, bumping her hoof against her chest nonchalantly.
You know, usual.
Rarity laughed, and Pinkie beamed. Queen Ileana, Rosa said. I'm glad you're here. The Queen nodded. Yes. Once I saw that our mediator was awake, I knew that now would be the proper time. The proper time for what? Twilight asked.
We just saved the world, Byron? Piggy suggested.
A proper time to continue negotiations, Queen Ileana said. Rarity's jaw dropped.
You can't be serious, even after everything that's happened.
Rosa nodded. There's still the matter of the sea serpent's death.
But, Rarity gaped at them, you're just united. I thought we moved past this.
An agreement's an agreement, Frozzo said. The sea serpents owe us for taking our eggs, of which we only recovered one. They either pay up the 80,000 gemstones, or we take their breeding grounds. Twilight groaned. Spikes followed suit. Rarity held back her own.
Can't you just settle that whole scroll thing aside now? Applejack asked. Yeah!
Rainbow Dash agreed.
It's like ancient history anyway.
Sometimes ancient history sticks around, Queen Ileana said. She looked pointedly at Spike. Rarity shut her eyes. There had to be a solution here. She guided the two species to unite in battle. She had to come up with a way to do that off the battlefield. She opened her eyes, staring out the ocean.
All right, let's all calm down. I think I have a way to settle this,
she said. It's hard to consider, since she'd been kind of hoping to keep it as the most significant souvenir of all time. But perhaps this was the better cause.
What if the sea serpents gave you a one-of-a-kind massive jewel, the likes of which can never be found again?
Rosa snorted. One jewel? We're asking for 80,000.
Rarity nodded. Oh, I know. But this one is really quite large. And only the sea serpents can fetch it for you. It's at the bottom of the ocean. It's a diamond-encrusted ball of space iron.
Rosa blinked at her. From the
battle, yes.
Rarity said. But that's yours! Queen Ileana gasped. You can't just give that to us!
I can and I am, Rarity sniffed. Now, do you accept or not?
Rarity turned to Rojo. Rojo's eyes glistened at the very idea. We accept! We definitely accept! Queen Ileana's face was still one of shock, and looked back at the pony in front of her. You truly are the generous one! Thank you! The best divers invented at once! Verity smiled, but her heart tugging toward the giant diamond ball as much as her horn did. So much for her most impressive feat of magic ever. So much for all those beautiful diamonds. But as the sea serpents and witness cheered, she couldn't help but smile. It was for the best. Verity hadn't realized it until that moment, but it acquired quite the audience. Sea serpents clustered near the shoreline, and dragons crowded around the periphery of the impromptu meeting. One dragon in particular pushed her way forward.
Hey! You're okay!
A booming voice exclaimed.
Moxie!
Verity grinned, running forward to meet her.
Didn't I tell you to let me know how she was doing?
Moxie asked Spike, putting one scaly arm around Verity in a hug. Spike kicked a bit of sand on the beach. Right, sorry.
What? When did this happen?
Verity asked.
You were a little out of sorts at the time,
Moxie said, winking at her.
Don't worry about it.
Verity shook her head. She found out that later from Spike, she was sure.
Moxie, dear, how's your life mate?
Verity asked instead. Moxie smiled.
He's just fine, recovering really well, and our egg is just 8 days away from hatching. Why, that's fantastic news!
Moxie nodded.
I know. Everything worked out. You know, mostly.
Verity frowned. She knew Moxie and her mate were having trouble making ends meet. It had been causing such a rift between them. And now, to throw an injury on top of it. A thought struck Rarity.
Rojo, she asked, is it too late to amend my offer?
Rojo turned from his talk with Queen Ileana. And now, a newly joined Princess Celestia.
When did she get here?
Rarity wondered.
Has she been watching this whole thing?
She swallowed. Oh well. Perhaps what she was about to ask wasn't exactly appropriate in political negotiations. But it was important to her.
Yes, but go ahead anyway,
Rosa said, raising a curious eyebrow.
I was hoping, you see, that my dear friend Moxie could be freely and forever given whatever child care and medical assistance she needs for her egg and mate,
Rarity said.
Without her, I never would have been able to save everybody, she added quickly. She deserves recognition. Times haven't been easy for her and her life mate. It's only appropriate that they see some sort of benefit in aiding the victory over the gargoyles.
Woo! Free healthcare for Dragonlance! Princess Celestia observed her, a twinkle in her eye. Moxie next to her gaped. Astonished, smoke tendrils drifted out of her mouth. Rosa looked mildly annoyed.
What makes you think?
But then, Spike flapped his wings once, blasting sand out to the side, even in his small forms. He glared up at Rosa.
Weren't you just saying that you were responsible for all dragons under your protection when you apologized to me? Don't they count?
Rosa took a step backwards from him. Verity's eyes narrowed in triumph. He was intimidated by little Spike.
Fine, he grumbled. They'll get all the help they need.
Pinkie Pie whooped in victory, leaping to the air and hugging Moxie's face.
Who's this?
Moxie asked, her eyes huge and words muffled, as Pinkie Pie gripped her around her jaw.
Piggy cheered. That is great news!
Rainbow Dash and Applejack laughed, leaning up against each other. Rarity's eyes watered with mirth. But before she could answer Moxie's question, though, several faint voices called out from the ocean.
Rarity! Hey! Rarity! Rainbow Dark! Rainbow Dash! Check this out, Rainbow Dash!
Rarity gasped, spinning out. Over the water, she spied a familiar purple sea serpent, with 3 little fillies on his back, and 1 yellow Pegasus flying overhead. Rarity ran up to the water's edge.
Sweetie Belle!
She called.
Oh my! I'm coming, baby sister! I'm coming! Fluttershy!
Fluttershy landed by her side, on the beach a moment later, giving her a hug.
She's okay,
Fluttershy reassured her.
She's healing up just fine.
The last bit of tension in Rarity's heart dissolved, and she hugged Fluttershy back.
Oh my goodness! How could I ever repay you? It was nothing, really,
Fluttershy replied.
She just needed a little time and a little laugh, and she's good as new.
The entire group of ponies made it to the water's edge by then, shouting greetings to the fillies. As Stefan swam closer to them, Rarity noticed something was a little off with him. Rarity's eyes widened, releasing Fluttershy. He was missing half his mustache again.
Hello, Tennis Swan!
Stefan called.
Lovely to see you again!
Stefan, you're...
Rarity then stopped. Sweetie Belle turned on Stefan's back, shaking her rump at her sister.
Look, Rarity! Look what Stefan gave me!
Looked around her little sister's backside was the other half of Stefan's mustache.
Her entire back half had been burned pretty terribly,
Fluttershy explained to a stunned Rarity.
Stefan offered a substitute tail until hers grew back in again.
Rarity laughed. Her smile pinched the corners of her eyes, and tears dripped out.
Thank you, Stefan, she said. It looks wonderful on her.
How could I let the princess of the sweetheart like that go around tailless?
Stefan replied.
The very thought!
Rarity shook her head in amusement. It seemed like things had finally come full circle. Later that evening, before the sun went down, Rarity sat alone on the beach, contemplating everything that had happened to her of late. Down the way, Spike and Twilight chatted. Her sister chased Apple Bloom and Scootaloo around, kicking up sand. Her friends intermingled with the sea serpents and dragons, and Rarity sighed. Moxie was right. Despite overwhelming odds, it had all worked out.
Hello, Rarity.
Rarity looked to her other side. Next to her, Princess Celestia touched down on the sand.
Your Highness!
Rarity exclaimed, bowing quickly. The evening sea breeze pushed at her side, but it wasn't yet cold enough to cause her to shiver.
Please get up,
Princess Celestia said, smiling.
You're the one who deserves the bows right now.
Rarity flushed, rising to her feet. I only have one moment before I need to finish setting the sun down, the princess said, but I wanted to check in and say thank you once again for doing what we could not.
Okay, so perhaps it was a bit of a problem, but it all worked out,
she said, repeatedly grateful for, and never forget, nor will any pony else. Rarity let out a laugh, and Princess Celestia raised an eyebrow.
Something funny.
Rarity just shook her head at the absurdity of everything.
Yes, I always dreamed of gaining fame and being known across Equestria, but I never could have predicted I'd do so as a war hero of all things.
Princess Celestia laughed slightly.
Well, sometimes life doesn't always work out that way we expect, but it does at least always work out, as you said.
Rarity's eyes fell on the scene down the beach again, and sighed contentedly.
It does,
she whispered.
Speaking of,
the princess continued,
I did realize I never actually answered your question from your original letter,
she added, spying Rarity's perplexed face.
About how dragons age. Oh!
Rarity's expression glanced awkwardly. She almost forgotten about that.
Do you still need that question addressed?
Princess Celestia asked. Rarity looked down the beach to a laughing Spike. The dragon caught her eye, and they shared a smile.
No,
she answered softly.
I think I've learned all I need to know.
Very well. With that, Princess Celestia nodded and flew off to resume setting the sun. Rarity settled her shoulders as Spike turned back to Twilight. The dragon was obviously regaling her with some exaggerated story. His hands gestured more and more excitedly with each passing minute. Rarity continued to smile. Yes, her questions had been answered. Now, she looked forward to discovering new ones. Epilogue. It had been a few days since they got home, and Spike reached a decision. Actually, 2 decisions, and somehow he had to work the courage to bring these decisions up to Rarity. He stood outside her boutique, holding one closed fist against the door. Okay, Spike, you can do this. Just knock. You got this. She loves you, remember? This shouldn't be so scary anymore. But Rarity actually liking him in return was still such a new idea. Spike woke up each morning convinced he imagined it all, but he couldn't have. A warm glow still filled him from when she held him that night on the beach, after every pony else had gone to sleep. They had been content that night, just happy to be near each other, holding one another, alive and together. But ever since he gotten back to Ponyville, life had been so busy. They barely had a chance to see one another at all. And now, especially with that whole entire princess thing happening at the Twilight. Spike's resolve straightened. He nodded.
We're just about ready to close for the day, but one last customer it shall be.
Rarity's sing-song voice answered. She opened the door, flipping open side to read closed.
Welcome to Carousel Boutique, where Spiky working,
she exclaimed upon seeing the little dragon. She scooped him up and slammed the door in delight.
Oh, my Spiky Wacky, what a surprise!
Just the smell of her was enough to make Spike produce a gushy, musty love-struck grin. He enjoyed their hug for a moment, then shook himself out of his reverie. Hey, Rarity, he said, extracting himself from her embrace and looking up at her. I'm here because, well, I have a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about.
Of course, Spike, anything,
Rarity said. She moved back to a rack of clothing, idly scanning it, probably to make sure it was in the correct order, as she closed the shop for the night. Spike swallowed. Okay, here goes. First of all, I've learned a lot about myself lately. Rarity paused her sorting and tapped her chin thoughtfully.
Yes, I suppose I can see how you've made it done so.
Spike narrowed his eyes at her. You're making fun of me, aren't you? He didn't state it as a question. Rarity gave him a slight smile, then pressed by and popped him lightly in the nose.
Just a little, dear.
She moved on to the other rack of clothing. Spike rolled his eyes. Well, anyway, one of the things I've learned is that I'm not alone. And being a stranded baby dragon, that is. There were 5 eggs taken, and I'm just one of them.
No one knows what happened to the other eggs, but I was thinking I might like trying to find them.
Verity stopped going through the clothing rack. Her body stiffened. She looked down carefully.
I think I'll start at the Canterlot Library, he continued quickly. Twilight's already offered to help, but you know how she is. We'll never get out of that library if she has her way. So, seeing it's Canterlot and all, I was wondering if maybe you wanted to come with me?
Verity's hooves were around him once more, this time crushing him to her fiercely.
Oh, darling! Of course! Canterlot would be wonderful! Goodness, for a moment, I thought you were going to tell me that you had to leave me to go on some soul-searching, egg-hunting quest for Celestia knows how long!
And if it ended like that, I would have been ticked. Leave you? Spike pulled back. Are you crazy? I could never do that. If I ever tried to find those eggs, I want you to be there with me, Rarity.
Verity's eyes shimmered, and she made some absurdly high-pitched noise. Then she kissed Spike on the end of his nose, and his face went red.
That sort of brings me to the next question,
Spike said.
Oh, Rarity asked. What's this?
She kissed his nose. Spike swallowed.
Yes, actually, you can do this, Spike. Come on. You destroyed hundreds of gargoyles. This should be easy. I sort of realized something.
He stepped back in Rarity, clinking his claws.
You, sort of given me a lot of, kisses, and which are incredible, he added quickly,
looking at her before he got any wrong ideas.
But I realized, well,
hold on. He sucked in a breath.
Just like you practice.
He turned around, shutting his eyes and concentrating. He centered his feelings on Rarity, on protecting her, caring for her, on the sensations he felt while flying through battle. Inner dragon. It began to grow. One foot began to stretch out, then the other. His wings unfolded larger and larger. It wasn't painful, exactly, but Spike wouldn't describe the sensation as comfortable. When he reached the size he'd been going for, he reined himself back in. Turning, he could now look Rarity directly in the eye.
Well,
he said, ignoring the dry feeling in his throat. He practiced these words in the mirror enough times. They come out right.
I realized I've never actually kissed you back. I thought it'd be nicer to do that if I could be the same height as you.
Verity's mouth hung open. She could practically feel her heart pounding its way out of her chest as Spike drew closer. Sweet Celestia, she'd never.
This was most unexpected, and, oh, for crying out loud, were her eyelids fluttering?
Verity took in a slow, calming breath. No, she was in control. This was... Spike's green eyes captured hers. Verity bit her lower lip. She had to admit, he had a fabulous idea. He should kiss her. He should kiss her right now.
The one problem is,
Spike said, stopping just a few inches away from her. His eyebrows were knit in genuine concern.
I've never kissed a girl before, so...
Spike fumbled for a bit at Rarity's hoof. His claws clumsy, but gently, lifted into the air.
Maybe I should practice first? If that's okay?
Mother of Equestria, Spike!
Verity's mind raced almost as fast as her heart.
You have no idea what you're doing to me, do you?
She watched him. His eyes danced nervously between her face and hoof. I realized his adorable naivete was no ploy, no act. Spike was genuinely terrified of messing this up. She almost laughed, but held back.
Go ahead, Spike,
Rarity told him. Spike set his shoulders. His wings clenched inwards, clearly a bit panicked. He lifted her hoof slightly higher. As Spike's warm claws cautiously raised it, goosebumps shot through Rarity, setting her entire body on alert. She shut her eyes.
Anytime now, Spike. You don't need to be nervous.
A mildly ironic statement, given the flurry feeling currently traveling through her at Wonderbolt racing speeds. When his mouth finally touched her hoof, Rarity felt her breath hitch. The kiss only lasted for a brief, tremulous moment, but the feeling remained long afterwards. Love. It felt like love. He dropped her hoof back down, stepping back from her and looking away.
Okay, so, how was that? Was that okay?
He asked. Rarity opened her eyes, Spike's own eyes swimming with sincerity. The poor dragon just wanted to know he hadn't screwed up, but Rarity could still feel his kiss. He was having trouble locating her voice at the moment, so she just nodded.
Spike winced. Maybe I just need to practice again before the real thing.
Rarity stepped forward, putting a hoof to his mouth to stop him from talking. She shook her head. Her breathing was shallow. No, Spike. No more practice. Spike looked pained at that. Rarity caught his gaze and held it until he came to understand her meaning.
Oh!
He finally said, beneath her hoof. Rarity lowered her hoof and stepped closer. Spike took a sedative step her way as well, setting his claws on her shoulders.
Really?
She nodded. It was nearly taking all of her self-control not to just lean in and kiss him herself. She never felt her heart beat like this before. She felt like she was a school filly again. Looking up into Spike's eyes became too much to handle, so she shut hers. Rarity could feel her breath quicken as the warmth of Spike's face neared her own. Then, his mouth was on hers. Rarity melted away into the gentleness of it all. Never in her life had she been kissed this way. She pulled Spike closer to her, holding on tight with one hoof over his shoulder. She couldn't resist any longer and returned his kiss, deepening it as far as she dared without pushing him into a panic. The kiss was sweet, soft, full of absolute undilating adoration. Interrupted.
Hey, Rarity, we got out early for school and I thought, whoa!
Rarity stumbled backwards, eyes flying open.
Sweetie Belle!
She turned into the door to face her sister.
I didn't know you were busy.
Sleevell stammered.
Didn't you see the signs that close? Alert to lock!
Rarity demanded. Next to her, she could still see Spike going bright red. For some reason, that just made Sleevell burst out into laughter.
Definitely will next time. I'll let you two get back to things down now,
she said, grinning. After all, she was going to have some practice kissing with Button Mass a little bit later. Rarity groaned as Sleepybell slammed the door and raced off.
It's going to be all over town now,
she said, rubbing her hoof to her face.
Sorry,
Spike mumbled, turning away. Rarity could only see his body tremble. As he realized he was about to shrink back down to tiny Spike out of sheer embarrassment.
Darling, stop.
Rarity quickly grabbed him, pulling him back.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't?
Spike looked at her, blinking. Rarity smiled, shook her head.
Let them talk. They'll be just jealous of us anyway.
She blinked at him, her expression turning serious.
Spike, I don't want to hide this. We're in love. Sure, it's complicated, and more than a little odd, and there's some bizarre cultural things to get over, like that life mate business, but it's nothing we can't figure out. Think of us as trendsetters.
Rarity held her head a little higher.
Maybe this type of thing hasn't been done before, but that just means we're ahead of the curve.
Spike still looked skeptical, so Rarity added,
And if you keep kissing me like that, I don't think I'm going to have any trouble with that life mate thing anyway.
That got Spike smiling.
So, you're saying you like how I kiss you?
Rarity stepped closer, forehead against his, carefully tilting her horn to one side. She could feel her eyelashes tickle Spike's scales.
Spiky Wikey, I like everything about you.
Rarity lowered her eyes demurely.
Now, where were we?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Crystal Clarity was conceived. True story.
No, really, that's how it happened, Crystal.
Uh-huh. The whole thing with the gargoyles?
Yes, Crystal.
My father growing?
Yes, Crystal.
Why don't I believe you?
Okay, Crystal. I'll admit it. I'll let you go. Besides, anybody who's watched this channel been long enough knows what it's time for. Review time! This fic, not gonna lie, there's a reason why it's kind of on my top 12 favorite pony fics of all time. And it's probably my favorite Sparity fic I've ever read. Hands down the best. Well, it's not going to be perfect. I do have a few complaints. Heck, give me long enough, I could probably find complaints of Fallout Equestria, but I do have a few. First off, I kind of felt like the worlds weren't as developed as we saw back in Tears of Gaia. I mean, in Tears of Gaia, I felt like there were living, breathing, thriving worlds that I could visit. I wanted to see the deer's homeland. I wanted to spend time with the griffins. The sea serpents and the dragon homes, not so much. Heck, it didn't even feel like there was much of a difference between the dragon's outcroppings and the sea serpent's isles. When I saw the sea serpents, I just felt, okay, meeting isles, boom, there was it. That was it. Hi, how you doing? Bye! And the same could be said of some of the other sea serpents. Even though I was able to change my voices pretty well, the main ones that I could recognize were Queen Ileana and her nephew, Stefan Magnet, who was fantabulous. Oh, why, thank you, Mr. Mosselaar. I did do my best in my own starring role. But the Dragonlands, not so much. I mean, while Rojo actually had some good character development near the end, as well as Nerf, I still would have preferred if we had more chance to see them, if there was more to these guys. The author notes that he wanted to show off that there were more sides to this argument than just that they were all bad or all good. And while Moxie and Rojo's actions later on and some of Queen Ileana's actions did help to support that theme, that part of the storyline, I wish there was more nice dragons, or at the very least, Moxie spent more time with Spike to help him get it through his head that this was not all dragons. But I still love that. I also personally would have loved to have more time with the gargoyles. Just a little. So that way they weren't just but this is just me and my personal preference towards villains. Sometimes having a villains who aren't as developed as Red Eye are good just so that way you can have a clear definition. To quote Jakar, no gray, just black and white. Me on one side, them on the other. Ha ha! Sorry, I'm a huge Babylon 5 fan. Then we get to the bigger pressing issue. Spike. Spike's a double-edged sword on this fic. With the way he's looking at his maturity and his growth and who he is. On the one side, for all of his claims that he wants to be fully grown, wants to be strong, wants to be protective, he's got some very, very childish outlook on this whole entire situation. A very childish outlook that he still hasn't grown out of. This is perfectly fine because, well, hey, he's still younger than most and lives with Twilight, who was a shut-in all her life, so there's that. But on the other hand, he still has a very childish idea. I need to protect. I have to be there. I have to fight. That's how I prove my worth. Maybe I am a dragon. Maybe being a monster is all I am. When by now he should realize that. His outburst during the campfire scene, while got some good emotions there, was probably Spike's most childish. Then he are pointing out that Fireside's not afraid of him. And before he could have a chance, he immediately started blasting off going, oh, it's because I'm not a real dragon. When the easiest enough way to solve this would have been to point out, no, she's also not afraid of you because she's your friend. She knows you. You are not a monster to her. It's not that you're not a monster or a real dragon. You are her friend. Understand that. And there are times when Spike goes, I need to protect, because he feels like that's his goal, even though there are these strong women in front of them and capable of fighting. No, I need to protect. I must do this. And on the other hand, while it still reflects good on some of the things that Spike's had to deal with, such as his place, see Power Ponies, or his own self-worth, see Equestria Games, or his desire to do good, or his own place, please see Dragon's Quest. All these are themes that have been touched on, but this fic does this really well and gives us a good examination. I just feel like sometimes Spike, despite his desire to try to prove that he's not a baby dragon, that he is his own pony, his own self-worth, sometimes his reactions just felt so childish. A real mature person would have been able to see that you don't have to protect, and you don't have to fight, and you don't have to stand your ground to be all that. And there are differences. That was another way he had this childish notion of going, well, there's no way that dragons, that beings who are capable of love, are capable of such great destruction. Spike, follow Equestria would like to have a few words with you. Also, a few other cultures. Sorry, Spike, but you're kind of looking at this black and white, and I really hate that ideal. On the other hand, it was really well done to look at this. As I said, despite the fact that Spike had childish notions, this was part of him growing and coming onto his own and slowly starting to realize this. He began to carefully realize that, yes, he didn't have to be a giant dragon. Yes, he had his own goals. Oh, that's another childish thing I forgot to mention, speaking of his own goals. That scene with Spike in the middle of the dragon cave. Spike! I'm going to talk to you seriously here, man. When you're in the middle of enemy territory, and you are trying to free the love of your life, do not tell them that she's the love of your life! This is Heroing 101! You don't go off and say, Lois is the one I dream of every night. She is the most beautiful thing in the world to me. Please do not hurt her! So what you're saying, Sir Man of Steel, is that if I were to kidnap Lois and hold her hostage and point a gun at her, you would do anything I say? Yes! Click, click! Kind of fails the purpose here when you reveal to the dragons you're trying to talk to that you are in love with her, because they are going to realize that you will do anything that they want as long as you have the prize. But anyway, back to the good points. Spike really does try to be mature. It's through his own faults and failings that he slowly starts to learn from his mistakes. We see that he starts to see things on a whole new light. He starts learning about all this. And it builds up on the lessons that he had learned from things like Dragon's Quest and Owl's Well Ends Well. And if we were to throw in Power Ponies and Friendship and Equestria games, we can see that Spike has learned from all these mistakes. He has learned from this, and these are building up to what he has grown into. This fic shows that Spike has learned a whole bunch of lessons. Not to mention the idea of protection. While the most important growth was Spike learning, hey, I have grown, I have changed, and my place is with my friends and family by the end of this. While still trying to figure out and realizing that, no, they care about him because they like him. There's also the limitations of protection. As I pointed out, Spike's childness was coming from him going, I need to protect! I'm big, strong man! Sadly, this is going to both his hero ideals, and I feel like this just makes me think of certain magical girl characters. Like, say, Mama Rutiba from Sailor Moon, or any type of deep-powered hero character, boy character from any magical girl series. Kind of like Winx. I would say Witch, but Witch is the exception, because characters like Matt and Caleb, despite the fact that they aren't as powerful as their girlfriends, still actually provide some sort of protection and actually fight on equals. Spike is working off on this hero ideal that I don't even know if this is coming from a masculinity side or his dragon instincts, but he feels like he needs to protect. He needs to be there to guard. However, he forgets he's dealing with the fastest fighter in Equestria, one of the strongest beings on Earth, one of the most powerful magic users on the planet, a mare who could negotiate herself out of a room full of Cobra and Hydra, a creature that was capable of making Discord her friend, and Pinkie Pie. Adding on to the CMC, Spike is trying to go, I want to protect, when these girls are capable of protecting themselves. Again, this is a character who wants to do this when he realizes there's nothing to help. Like I said, makes me think of Mamoru Chiba on Sailor Moon, where there have been points in the comics where he has felt the desire to, I have to protect Usagi. I have to be there for her. But I'm so weak. Because, again, Sailor Moon, they've got the powers. He's just got a smoking bomber. And that's what I was getting from Spike whenever he kept thinking about, I've got to protect, I've got to protect. He wanted to prove himself useful because, well, again, these girls really don't need him. Twilight doesn't need protection, neither does Applejack. In a way, this is a good callback to Worried and Waiting when Spike points out what his and Flash's goals are. And what they need to do as characters. And I like how it touches on that. And I like how this story does too. They're trying to protect. Spike wants to protect, and that is the way he feels like he can help. That way they can pull off the big cool moves and the strong badass moments and all that. Which leads me to probably my favorite thing about this fic, Rarity. Too often in a Sparity fic, well, bad Sparity fics, Rarity is left to do this. Oh, help me! Won't somebody with their big strong dick come and save me?
Spike, don't worry, little lady. I'm Spike. Me man, me manly. Watch me beat this guy with one flick of my finger.
In order to make Spike look good, Rarity has to become the DID, the damsel in distress. And I do not come to Ponyfix for that. I've had enough of that with Sailor Moon fanfics, thank you very much. If you have paid attention to the Von Doom stuff I've done over the past year, you'll see just how badly it got. And I hate when a fanfic feels like it has to do that to Lady Rarity when she is not. This fanfic doesn't forget that. As a matter of fact, it looks at that bad Sparity trope, kicks it in the nads, and proceeds to run off screaming, I am awesome. Because we see why Rarity is awesome. Granted, the other main six don't get to do much, but it's not their story. Fluttershy, something wrong?
Oh, nothing, Mr. User. It's just that,
What?
well, ever since Arouse is Aroused, I haven't had much to do lately. I've been mainly put into the sidelines. Even Pinkie Pie's had more screen time than me.
I know, Flares. Don't worry. I promise you, Last of the Dragon Lords is coming.
Yeah.
Besides, you had plenty to do with Tears of Gaia.
Here's a guy who's on a whole other level.
I mean, not Tears of Gaia. You had plenty to do on Book of Harmony.
That story's on a whole other level.
True. But Rarity is at her best here. By using her business sense, her nobility sense, and her ladylike sense, she's able to negotiate, be fabulous,
have a flair, as he proceeds to talk to negotiate with the sea dragons, broker a peace between the sea serpents and the dragons, able to walk the walk and talk the talk, sacrificing her gem. Even when she's captured, does she allow it to happen? Heck no! Is he busy going, "Oh, won't Spike come in and save me?" No. No. That would be the Rarity I did not fall in love with. No. The Rarity I know is going,
Okay, so let's use this little bitty rock here to pry open the bars and I can make my daring escape. All the while looking hot and fabulous.
that is my Rarity. That is awesome. And we see her not only just pulling that off, but also working on a side plan where she proceeds to smooth talk her way with Moxie. She smoozes with it. She looks so classy while she's doing it. And then we get to Rarity's crowning moment of awesome and any fic. One that matches her moment on the Immortal Game, where she was a great swordsman. Yes. Rarity using her gem finding spell to lift up every single gem on that volcanic mass, and then stopping a meteorite, turning it into a ball, and chucking it like she's the world's greatest baseball player. That, my friends, is pure awesome. That is just simply glorious. It shows us what Rarity can do. While not much of a powerhouse on the level of Twilight Sparkle, but Twilight's the element of magic, she can still hold her own. She is still powerful in her own right. Those are her skills. Those are her powers. That is what makes her a strong female and a powerhouse, because she's able to use all those gems so effectively. And I feel like this shows just how Rarity can be used. And why she is simply fabulous. There was a forum post I read not too long ago where it tried to talk about how Lauren was especially proud of Rarity. And we can see why here. Too often, sometimes you'll hear Rarity being you hear feminine traits like desire to look good and pretty, dressmaking, or being fabulous can be looked as a weakness. Rarity, as a fashionista, exemplifies all the feminine tropes, and yet shows that's not a weakness of her character. That doesn't make her a weak, wimpy character. It shows how it could be her strength to her advantage. It shows how skilled she can make it, and how she owns that. It's not weak to embrace those. It is weak to let those dominate her character and to make her go, "Eek! Oh, help me, Spike! I'm trapped in this cage! Oh, help me, Spike! This monster has me! Oh, help me, Spike! I'm trapped on this giant crystal tower, and this monstrous dragon with two heads is attacking me! Won't you please go God suicide and save today?" That is the reason why this fight-going dragon size works better than some of the other fics that tried the same thing. Because, again, Rarity's not diminished as a character. She's not left up there screaming her head off. No. She's left there, but she's still doing things on her own. And Spike is helper. They work together. You don't need a romance like this to make one character feel better than the other. You can make them equals. And while I feel like Rarity was the main character and the hero, and probably more dominant than anything else, Spike still had his times to shine and still had chances to show how he could help, how he was beneficial in this relationship. He's a guardian. He's a protector. He's the one who can watch over Rarity when she comes home. He's the one who watches over her. And you know what?
There's no shame in that type of relationship. There's no shame in having a guy who is willing to watch over you when you're busy after you've done all the work and helping you out. Just like there's no shame in somebody helping you out. This was the See, this is what I didn't mind. This is what I was talking about with Tears of Gaia. You'll note Rarity was saved, but she was still trying something else. If this was a scene like this back in Tears of Gaia with Fluttershy, I wouldn't be as angry with it. But there it is. The romance I felt was equally developed well. We had Rarity take a genuine, serious look at her relationship with Spike. How did dragons age and mature differently? How are they growing? How did they change? And taking everything into consideration and actually start thinking about it. While at the same time, we saw her put her mind to the other subjects. I also felt like Rarity and Spike grew very much through this fic. And again, while this was at the expense of the other main six, this was not their story. This wasn't even the CMC story, and I love Sleepbell in all this. And I think even Sleepbell has some small bits of character development. Overall, a great and classic fic that was a blast for me to read. Next week, tomorrow, Universe. Octavia, if you please give us a trailer. For the past few weeks, I've been helping Trixie. I've been pointing out everything that Greengrass has done, all of his planning. But now, I'm dreadfully afraid. I fear he might find out, and this might be the end of my musical career. My name is Octavia Melody, and this may be my last, greatest performance. Not if I have anything to say about it. Next time on The Universe! Through the fire and flames! Symphony of Moon and Sun. See you there. It'll serve me a great performance.
Mr. Art User,
Yeah, Nix?
can we tell him yet?
No, Nix. Give it time. Give it time. We'll tell them later.